Right now, government's still shutting down and, of course, the default clock ticking, but we're beginning to see a few signs of hope. We have the latest from Washington. And tonight, we will hear from a Congresswoman, Marsha Blackburn. We're going to find out about how the nation's fiscal challenges not only ought to be resolved, but how she and Republicans are facing in the worst poll numbers they've ever seen. And later, a mayor's life. Our one-on-one interview with David Dinkins, former mayor of New York City. He'll share his insights from his new book and also sound off on the current mayoral race. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us this Friday evening, October 11th. A lot to get to in the next 60 minutes, but we begin tonight with the latest from Washington and, of course, the ongoing shutdown. Now, I'll call it negotiating over negotiations as the government goes into its second week of being out of business. Senate Republicans, the last group of lawmakers to make the trip down Pennsylvania Avenue for meetings with our president. Yesterday, House Republicans presented the White House with their plan to temporarily raise the debt ceiling for 6 weeks. That in order to allow more time to negotiate over the budget issues. But despite intensive talks, there is no deal, and for that matter, nothing even close to a deal. Senator Susan Collins, she called today's meeting inconclusive yet positive.
So I'm pleased that the president is now finally engaged, and he is talking to Republicans and Democrats on both sides of the Capitol.
And for more, we're very pleased to be joined by Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn, Republican from Tennessee. Congresswoman, thank you very much for a few minutes. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Good to be with you. Thank you.
You as well. As some of the details unfolding here, I have a question. If the White House, and it now seems not just Democrats, but even some Republicans in the Senate, insist that a debt limit extension here, let's say for another 6 weeks or 6 months, whatever the time period, is attached to reopening of the government, will House Republicans go along with that?
Well, what we want to do is make certain that there is a process for the debt ceiling discussions, and that is what we have laid out. Now, the continuing resolution, the spending bill, to which the slowdown or partial shutdown, whatever you want to call it, is attached to, those are separate measures. And we didn't want the government to shut down in the first place. So we would really appreciate if the Senate were to agree to sit at the table with us to go through negotiations or a budget reconciliation and work with us to get the government open.
I know you've seen the polls today, both from Gallup, a Wall Street Journal here. By every estimation, they're devastating, particularly for the GOP. The lowest in the history of the poll is the approval rating of the Grand Old Party right now. The view of the party here, less than a quarter have a positive view of Republicans, and the job approval rating is sitting at 24%, while 70% have a disapproval rating. In the history of the poll, these are the lowest numbers. You know and I know Republicans aren't in a position here of strength to negotiate. Is it time here to just throw in the towel and say, okay, maybe this was a strategy without an end game, let's move on, let's reopen the government here, and let's fight for another day?
Well, I have to tell you, there is a very solid end game, and it's the end game that people have been asking us to pursue for years. And that is to get out of control federal spending under control. And for all of the hubbub about, well, you have to pay for this and you have to pay for that, the American people are the ones that put every penny that this government has access to into that till.
To that point, though, Congresswoman,
individuals that are saying,
yeah, fair enough. But to that point, the American public has spoken clearly. And while I don't think many disagree with you that we do have a debt issue in this country, the tactics in which we've got to where we are right now, the public has spoken as emphatically as I've seen any poll ever done on this, certainly in the history of this. They don't like the idea of a shutdown. They don't like the idea of going over the debt cliff. And they hold Republicans clearly responsible, most specifically the Tea Party. So I'm saying, given the reality on the ground, and given what some of the key stakeholders, the idea, I know you know Mike Lee and have a favorable opinion, he is running underwater now in the state of Utah. I mean, just as an example of this, they are out for blood, the public is, on the Tea Party for where we are now. Isn't it time to wave the white flag?
No, it is not time to wave the white flag. It is time for the Senate to sit at the table and negotiate with us. You know, we have raised the debt ceiling 53 times over the last 4 decades, and 27 of those times it has been negotiated with spending reductions involved in that process. So it is time for the White House and the Senate to sit down and work with us, and we look forward to working with them.
Do you consider yourself, Congresswoman, a member of the Tea Party? And if not, why?
I do not belong to the Tea Party caucus. I have lots of friends that are in the Tea Party, that are involved in 9/12 groups and different activist groups. I've always been a member of the Republican Party.
Why? I'm sure you've been asked, because I've seen in some of the literature people saying that they proudly call you among them if you don't consider yourself. Why wouldn't you wave the same banner that some of the Tea Party folks very proudly do, as you know, in the House?
Oh, I love the Tea Party organizations. I don't think the Tea Party return address should be Washington, D.C. I think it should be anywhere USA. And as I said, I do a lot of work, a tremendous amount of work with the Tea Party in my district, and led that grassroots effort in my state, which would have, you know, that was 98 to 2002. It was before you had the Tea Party organized as such. And I understand why people have been so attracted and drawn to the Tea Party. They are so frustrated with what they see happening in Washington, D.C. Waste, fraud, and abuse of taxpayer funds, disrespect for the institutions of government, disrespect for the Constitution. So it's easy to understand why they are so drawn to that. And I will say this: our Tea Party and 9/12 organizations, activists and grassroots organizations, the issue groups, have done a great job educating people on civics and government participation.
Have they done a great job for the party? Because, and you're closer to this than me, you can't turn anywhere today without seeing Republican go against Republican for both not only the strategy but the end game, and they're pointing fingers directly at the Tea Party. For the polls that I've gone over, among approval or views of the Tea Party, less than 20% of the public has a positive view of them. Many people look at the Ted Cruz of the world and see where the GOP finds itself today. Obamacare more popular today than it was 2 weeks ago, and again they blame the Tea Party. Do you think the Tea Party has been good for your political party?
I think the question to ask is, what about organizing for America for the Democrats? You know, what do people think about organizing for America and
fair
George
enough. No,
Soros?
You know, fair enough. But you know what? Nobody
move
thinks
on
fair.
and
you know,
some of those groups.
You got.
So.
No. You time out. You're right. You got liberal groups on the Democratic side, but they don't basically command the agenda for the party. Nobody has to go check with OFA or with those groups before they make policy. Or they certainly don't wave the flag in Washington.
I would disagree with you on that.
Okay.
You know, I think that I really would disagree with you on that.
All right. Well, we can end it there. Congresswoman Blackburn, I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I think even a casual observer could pick up nobody wants to be at the Tea Party except for, I guess, the diehards now after what we've seen for the last 2 weeks in those poll numbers. So we're asking you at home to join our conversation. Please go over to Facebook and Twitter. And here's our question tonight that you can sound off on. How much harm has the GOP done to itself with this shutdown? You look at the polls, historic levels. That's how bad the grand old party is. Now, when we come back, our panel joins us to sound off on the shutdown, the impact on Republicans, and where we go from here. Please stay with us. RFL back right after this.